Good evening, all you happy people. It is Monday Morning Quarterback, episode 69. Hope you had a fantastic start to your week. And Monday's always hectic after sprint week, so we've been busy with sprint week and all sorts of action going on around here. Had a good sprint week, won 4 of the 8 races. Tyler Courtney won 2, and Kyle Cummins won 2, and almost won 5. McDougal lost one there on the last corner, come home second, but a good sprint week. We're very happy with that, and looking forward to the midgets PA week kicking off tomorrow. We've had a great midget season. We've been working really hard on our midget shock package, so looking forward for that kicking off. We're not going to be out there at PA, but looking forward to tuning in on Flow Racing and catching all of that. Out at the Grands last week, was bummed. Some last minute things came up and we weren't able to attend. But good Grands for us. QMA Eastern Grands. Skylar Keeney won Junior Honda and Junior Animal. Chase Bacola won Heavy Honda. And Kaylee Boston won Mod and B, all on CSI Shocks. So proud of all those kids for the efforts they put in out there. And then at the Dirt National at Terre Haute last week, Lincoln Smith won Junior Animal. Gavin Miller won Light World Formula, and Hunter Wise won Unrestricted Animal on our shocks. So really cool to see those young kids progressing as the seasons went on, and we're looking forward to going to Darlington here at the end of the month. And in between, we've got some more sprint car races and SmackDown and all sorts of good stuff coming on this summer. Let me see, any questions? Steve was out at the Grands. Seen you guys made an A-Main and Junior Animal, I believe. So that's awesome. It's not an easy accomplishment at your first Grands. So tonight we're going to cover helper springs. So this is a topic that I've got a bunch of questions on. It seems like we filled a lot of calls. There's some confusion. There's 2 different ways you can run a helper spring. Majority of the dirt midgets are running a helper spring setup. A lot of the non-wing mini sprints, and then we do see some non-wing micros run it, but it's not nearly as common on the micros. A lot of the reason is you don't have enough length on a micro. But so tonight we're going to show you the 2 different ways you can run a helper spring, and you really need to determine what your personal preference is. Throughout my career of working on midgets, I've ran them both ways. Lately, I've just been running it on the floating style without the lock nuts, and I seem to do fine with that. Me personally, I can tend to get the car too tight with the lock nut style. We have a couple premier midget teams, and one goes one way and one goes the other. So it really is preference, but a helper spring is pretty much a must on a midget. And one of the main reasons is you go down the straightaway, you'll lift off that main spring, and if you don't have a helper or something else there, when you go to travel into the corner, the car will free fall down to that main spring, and that's kind of an uneasy feeling for the driver. Can tend to unload the car with that. So what I'm going to show you next is the first way you would run a helper spring. And I don't even want to say the most common, because I think it's about 50-50 with our customers and how they do it. But this is the simplest way to introduce a helper spring to your program if you currently are not running it. And again, a helper spring is doing just that. It's helping. Some people call it a transfer assist spring or a secondary spring. And basically, it's helping transfer weight from front to rear a little bit quicker than you can do with your main coil. So this is what you're looking at, and what we got here is step 1. What you see there is how the shock should look when you go to block the car. So you have the blocks under the front axle, and you notice there's no helper spring installed. So what you're going to do in this instance, you're going to bring your ride height adjuster down to touch on the helper sleeve, and you're going to screw that down until you have a little bit of tension on your main coil spring. At that point, the car's blocked. You'll tighten up your ride height adjuster. Then you can take the blocks out from underneath the car, the spring perch off, the main coil off, the helper sleeve off, put the helper spring on, as you'll see in step 2, and then put that whole assembly on. Now we have 2 different height helper sleeves. We have a tall sleeve that we typically run on the right front and a short sleeve that we would run on the left front. And I've seen people run them in both orientations. They are designed to be run tall side out. So just so you know, that's how they are designed to be run. And basically what will happen in this orientation, as you see step 2, that's complete. So your right height adjuster was locked down, and you're just going to slide all that stuff in there, put your spring perch on, and you're ready to go. And so with it in this fashion, if you need to raise the car, you just adjust your right height adjuster down, raises the car. You're adjusting the helper spring and the main coil spring all at the same time. As it goes to transfer into the corner, this helper spring sleeve will lock up against the right height adjuster, and then you're just working off the primary spring. Because as we stack 2 springs there, we're dividing up the spring rate, which isn't necessarily what we're trying to achieve. So the reason those sleeves come in different heights is so you can basically lock that helper spring and then just work off the main coil spring. Let me scan over and see if I got any questions with that. Mark Ashcraft's got a quarter midget question. I'll circle back to that, Mark, your quarter midget question there. So that is the first way you can do it. And again, there's no lock nuts there. There's no way to independently preload the helper spring. We've determined the preload by the height of that helper spring sleeve when we blocked it, and we're just going to raise and lower the car as we need for our adjustments, but the helper spring is just there, okay? It's going to prevent that spring, what we call spring slap, or when you go down the straightaway and you rise up off the spring and then it falls down onto it, it's going to eliminate some of that. That helper spring helper spring is preloaded a fair bit, so it's going to help with some weight transfer up off the corner. So that's the first way you can run it. I'll fade on over to our second image here, and this is going to show the second option. And again, it's about 50-50. It's really personal preference. So step 1 is going to show what the shock should look like when you're blocking the car. So you have the blocks under the axle. You can see the right height adjusters way up away from the lock nuts. It doesn't even come into play. You're not even fooling with that at this point. What you're going to do is you're going to bring those 2 lock nuts, or really bring the 1 lock nut down until it touches the helper sleeve and you get some tension on the main coil spring. You'd block it in the same fashion as if you didn't have a spring. You weren't going to run a helper spring. You just want to get some tension on that main coil spring, and that's just feel, as long as you do it the same every time. So you'll bring that lock nut down to the helper sleeve until there's tension on the main coil. Bring the second lock nut down to it and lock it up. At that point, the right height adjuster is just going to stay floating up there. It's out of the way. So the car's blocked. Your lock nuts are jammed together, so they're locked on the shock body. Again, you'll take the spring perch out. You'll slide the main helper spring off, the sleeve off. The lock nuts will stay, and your helper spring will slide over those lock nuts, as you see in the step 2. So the helper spring slides over those lock nuts. Again, you'll bring your helper sleeve up, your main spring, and your spring perch, and now you're ready to go, and you can independently adjust how much you're engaging that helper spring. Some people will put it back on the blocks and they will bring that right height adjuster down to touch on the helper spring. Some will start with 1 or 2 turns of preload in it. Again, that's going to be personal preference and what you want to do. How much do you want to preload that helper spring? How much transfer assist are you looking for? Does all that make sense? Let me look on over and see if we have any questions. Sam's tuned in. Sam put together these beautiful drawings for me at the 12th hour when I was trying to figure out what Monday morning quarterback was going to be at about 3 o'clock today. So all that makes sense on the helper spring stuff. We'll answer those questions first, and then I'll jump around and answer any other questions you guys have. No questions with the helper springs. We're going to put, since Sam spent that time and made those nice drawings, we'll put some diagrams on our website so you can refer back to them for future reference. I think that'll be helpful for everybody. How does the first kind make it tighter? Ryan, do you mean like make the race car tighter? I assume that's what you're asking. And it doesn't necessarily make the car tighter. It's going to help with forward drive. So in that aspect, I guess it would kind of make it tighter. That's a vague term, but it's going to help with forward drive because that first spring is going to be preloaded a bunch. So when the car goes to transfer off the corner, that helper spring is trying to push the front of the car up. Kenny, that would be the same on junior sprints. There's just not enough room to really run a helper spring. Junior sprints, most of them being 4-coil cars, I don't really think you need it. And even the bar cars, they tend to jump up off the corner pretty quick. Ryan, so correct. So the second style I showed, which I'll fade back to that. So the second style I showed, this style here with the lock nuts, you can independently preload that helper spring. So you can change how much or how little that engages. So if you preload that helper spring too much, especially like if you preloaded the right front too much, it tends to get a lot of left rear drive and it can get tight in the center of the corner. The other style, the no nut style, we'll call it, it's set. Okay, so when we designed these helper spring sleeves, we preloaded it a certain amount. It's fairly conservative. You can't independently adjust that preload. So does that make sense? Ryan, does that make sense for you? That the second one you can independently adjust the preload of the helper, the no nut style you cannot. Jimmy, I wouldn't personally run that on the right rear of a non-wing sprint car. I've seen some cars out west in the desert where the tracks are really, really slick. I've seen them run a coilover on the right rear, but that's not something I personally would do. Let me go back. Mark, why choose a spring over a bump rubber? So this is a little bit different, Mark. This is actually a transfer assist spring, so it's not, we're not using it in the same fashion we would as a bump rubber. This is just helping with weight transfer up off the corner, and it will stay in that spring much longer. It's much taller, where a bump rubber, you're not going to get into it that much, and a bump rubber is going to affect compression just kind of more so than rebound, where the helper spring is, we're trying to get it on the rebound side of the shock. These springs are very soft. They're 0, 25, or 50-pound rates, so that's where we're at on that. Let me scroll back up to Mark's other question. It's a quarter midget question. The advantages of running a 116 left rear spring over a 125 spring. As you can take left rear spring out of a quarter midget, there's speed there. It's the same as taking cross out of the car. That's the heaviest corner of the car, typically the softest compound on the car, and if you can take some left rear spring out, there's a little bit of speed to be gained there. The downside is it doesn't transfer to the right front as much, so you got to make sure your car is turning adequately. And then your next question is a little bit of a loaded one because it depends on the corner, but a 3.2 has less rebound than a 3, so it's going to rebound up quicker. We would typically run that like on a left front where we're trying to transfer weight to the right rear. It's going to come up quicker than it goes down, so that's going to help with weight transfer to the right rear corner if you were to run it on the left front. Sometimes we'll run a 3.2 on the right rear of a Honda car where it's very low powered and we're trying to get that right rear out of the racetrack from center to exit, and so we'll run less rebound to try to help with getting that corner up a little bit faster. Any other questions for those of you tuned in? Monday Morning Quarterback, episode 69. We're talking about helper springs, and we're answering any of your tech questions or any pit logic questions. We can answer those as well. Not seeing any other questions come in. We have some cool Monday Morning Quarterbacks kind of in the works. We have a big announcement coming later this week about something new we're going to be doing at CSI. So we have some Monday Morning Quarterbacks that are going to relate to that. And we also are working on a maintenance Monday Morning Quarterback. So like what your maintenance would look like on a sprint car, say from after the race, car wash, etc., etc. And we'd like to do that for the micro stuff too. So Kevin, this is a hot debate. What's better, red vines or Twizzlers? So I had to go to my grandfather's funeral last week out in Virginia, and that's one of the reasons I didn't go to the Grands. And when I came back, sometimes when we order like office supplies or boxes, they'll put like a gift in because we buy so much toner and paper. And their gift was a nice big box of red vines, and I guess everybody was complaining. They're like, why did Garrett order red vines? And that we don't like red vines, we like Twizzlers. Well, Twizzlers is like a Midwest thing. They suck. Red vines are way better, but it must be everybody from the West Coast thinks red vines are better because my wife and everybody here from the Midwest thinks it's Twizzlers. So I think I told Kevin at Clay Cup that I was pumped that he had red vines in his trailer. Mark, release date on maintenance section of Pit Logic. Kevin could probably better answer that. I know we don't have an exact release date. We're working through that and some other things for Pit Logic. I don't want to speak out of turn, so I don't know exactly where Kevin's at, but I know he's been working on it. So if Kevin's comfortable giving a time frame, I'll let him pop in. Otherwise, thank you for your patience. It is kind of a big add-on we're doing to Pit Logic. He showed me the tire library portion at Clay Cup. Super awesome. You're going to be able to log what tires are on what wheels. It'll sort every combination by stagger. Really going to be really handy for dirt guys, pavement guys. So I know that was a big undertaking. Kevin is feeling funny tonight. Yes, there will be a release date. So yeah, we're working on that. It isn't just the maintenance section that we're unveiling, or we probably could have launched it by now. We're doing like several big things that are going to come out with the next release. On the tire library is what I'm like extremely excited for. The maintenance is going to be really cool, but the tire library is awesome. So Ryan has seen teams that are really fast run a helper at the beginning of the night and take it off when it goes slick. That does not make sense to me. Most people would run it all night, but if there was a point to run it, it would definitely be when the track gets slick. So Kenny, on the quarter midget springs, I don't know that there's a measurable difference from a 4-inch to a 6-inch. There are some pretty poor quality quarter midget springs out there. I think people kind of thought like, oh, they're kids' race cars. We can just get these springs mass produced and they'll be close enough, and you get to rating them and they're all over the place. I would stick with one of the major spring manufacturers, Hypercoil or Eibach. We have really good luck with the Hypercoils. They're 4 1/4 tall, have a slight barrel shape, which gives them a little bit of progressive rate, and that helps with weight transfer. And so we really like the Hypercoil stuff, but Eibach is a good spring as well. So, all right, no other questions. We hope you guys have a fantastic week. If I missed your question, ask it, and I always try to go back and answer. Some people who commented on a Facebook post a little bit ago, maybe a week ago, where they were racing and then if they won, we're going to be contacting you this week to get your prizes out. Thank you for participating in that. And like and share this video if you would, so we can get it out to some more people. Hope you guys have a fantastic night, and we will catch up with you next Monday. Take care.